Well, as always, your comments and questions are welcome in the chat window for our live Q&A, which follows today's high-intensity tech training. Today, we take a deep dive into the explosive growth of artificial intelligence and how Telarus advisors can assist their clients in using AI to its full potential. We'll show you today how to get better context, greater security, and how to use AI in synergy with clients' existing data. Today's HITT presentation is hosted by Telarus VP of Cloud, Koby Phillips. Koby, it's great to have you back once again. You always fire up the advisors with powerful information and terrific guests, some of which you have again today. Welcome, and I'll let you introduce today's additional panelists from Expediant. Hi, everybody.
Hey, thanks, Doug. Through the troubles of air travel, I'm here today. As you guys saw, Dan was originally going to host, but we're able to relieve him of that duty. And thanks to Delta and some delayed flights, I get to join Brad Reynolds and Tom Cooper from Expediant today to do a deep dive into their AI platform, which is taking off very quickly, right, Brad? I mean, you guys are just seeing a ton of success early. And really, what I love about it is how simplistic you make it for customers. A very complex technology, very methodical way that you guys approach it to make it simple for your clients. Can you guys, introduce yourselves a little bit, titles, all that good stuff, a little background for the group, and then we'll dive into what is going on in Expedient and why everybody's so excited about this AI platform.
Yeah, thanks, Koby. So Brad Reynolds, co-founder of Expedient, Chief Strategy Officer, SVP of Artificial Intelligence, may have another title coming down the pike. But kind of focus area here is I built and sold the company a long time ago, back in the telecom days, and came back to build the AI practice out. And, it's just been, I think 2024, from our perspective with AI, it was a lot of education and searching and people trying to figure out their strategies. And it definitely feels like, and we're seeing the momentum from the advisor community, that 2025 is the year of execution, and funnels and deals and all of that kind of back that up. So that's kind of what we're up to. And then I recently brought Tom Cooper about 6 months ago in. So Tom, maybe you can introduce yourself and what you're up to and a little history.
Sure. My name is Tom Cooper. I am heading AI product here at Expedient. Brad and I have had multiple ventures that we worked on together after he initially sold Expedient. And now my role is to help build our AI software solution, not only to meet our direct customers' needs, but more specifically to meet our partners' needs, to make sure that the solution we have is easy to implement and solves real problems for our direct clients and for your direct clients.
Sorry, Tom, I mean to step on you there. So
No, good.
Everybody's super excited about the possibilities of AI, right? That's one of the biggest hooks, along with like some cybersecurity things and cloud at the VMware platform changes and everything, which Expedient also does a really good job with. But in particular, on the AI side of things, what have you guys designed that has been so eye-catching to customers and partners alike? We've seen some very quick wins. Last week, Jason Kaufman actually referenced one that we'll get into a little bit more in depth here momentarily. But what is it that's happening over at Expedient with this platform that's so different than some of the other guys that are going to market?
Brad, you want me to take that one?
You on the platform.
Sure. So we're approaching AI, and I think everybody wants to say that they're approaching technology and simplifying it, right? But for our perspective, there is a need for security and a need for compliance to be wrapped around AI in order for enterprises today to even step into AI. And that represents a significant challenge of unknown as, enterprises move through the decision-making process of, honing onto which AI platform to make their strategic bet on. So what we do is step that back by providing a platform that actually brings in all of the AI providers, but brings them under a secure, private, and compliant usage model. We make it easy to start engaging with AI. And, if you call it a crawl, walk, run approach, that crawling, we really help customers be able to make that step into crawling without worrying about whether or not their data is going to leak or if their usage of AI, is violating one of the compliance standards that they're looking at.
And those are two of
Yeah.
the major
So,
concerns, right, Tom, in the ability for companies to start adopting AI or to utilize it. It's almost paralyzing to a degree. So when you say use all the AI platforms, can you give some examples to the audience, like what you're referring to there?
Sure. ChatGPT 4.0, Anthropic Claude models are probably the talk right now. When we talk about Google models or the meta models, bringing in each model that has a different flair and something that it's better for, but definitely at the top echelon of models. This is separate from the discussions of DeepSeek and whether or not people want to trust that. These are bringing in models that you already know and trust the brands, but we're building the compliance around them and the privacy attestations around them.
So, Brad, would you say similar to how cloud adoption went, where everybody originally went out and said, we got to go to Azure, we got to go to AWS, but as it matured, you started seeing organizations utilize a hybrid approach and utilizing the best of every, breed that's out there. It sounds like what you guys have built allows for a customer to use all of these public LLMs and platforms and bring it in and then securely let that resonate within the environment for the customer.
yeah,
What? Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe think about it this way. It's a little different from cloud. So when hyperscale really took off, the things that they did were relatively well understood. So it's like, oh, I like Amazon's tooling or I like Azure's kind of application set, but the actual instances and services were pretty well understood. With AI, most people don't understand kind of who's going to be the leader, what's the right technology, how do I hook it to my data. So at least for the foreseeable future, having the optionality of trying to use the best tool for the job and letting somebody like us who build a platform figure out how to integrate all these different components into the platform for you so you can just pick the right tool off the shelf when you need it. And you've essentially hedged your bets against going all in on one particular provider. Like, for instance, if you go the Copilot route, you have now gone all in on Microsoft and all in on OpenAI. We don't know. There's no expert that says, well, that's the right bet for the next 5 years. It's too ambiguous. So that's where we look at it is like, hey, we'll have a neutral platform. You can connect to a whole bunch of data sources, you connect to a whole bunch of AI models. As new things come out, we'll add them as plugins. But you kind of connect to one platform and you get the best of the whole world.
Now, one of the major things that we see with customers whenever we start to get into these AI discussions, one of the first questions we ask, what's your data look like? Is your data ready for AI and everything like that? Now, I know in our previous discussions, Expedient's not going to go through and cleanse out the data and everything, but you guys do have a unique way that you're approaching this as well. So how are you guys helping customers get ready to start consuming and everything with their data and making sure that that's ready to go?
So we're tackling this from two approaches. I think as we talk to each company, whether or not there's been data curation is always a big concern. So the first mechanism that we've done is, hey, let's take traditional enterprise search and solve this in the most simplest way possible. Let's give you guys a new repository where you can bring highly curated data into it and automatically have that data vectorized and put into the chat application, right? So now you can use your data. Think of HR, right? HR is highly static content, maybe changes annually. It's a limited subset of data, anywhere between 50 to 100 documents. But the amount of benefit that an HR department gets by taking that data and in one day having that data indexed where all of their employees can now do things like tell me about my PPO, compare our PPOs, tell me about my 401k, how do I schedule a dentist appointment, am I off on President's Day, right? All of those questions now become incredibly simple to answer from a technology perspective and incredibly easy to implement. As we move to the other side, where there needs to be a larger swath of data, LLMs are good at unstructured data, but not great at uncurated data because it's looking at the content of files. So we work with companies to take their most curated folders. You can think of, your IIS documents, your support documents, your training documents, things that have been naturally curated existing where they live, and we can still bring those in and activate those without needing them to copy them. But curation is definitely something that we're trying to help people handle in a more bite-sized approach instead of having to look at AI being on the opposite side of a data lake.
So essentially, that was that kind of that crawl, walk, run scenario that you'd mentioned in your opening statement. So whenever you're seeing this, and what's the engagement look like, guys, whenever you guys are getting into a deal and you're starting to get into, some use cases and things like you laid out a couple right there, like, hey, just make your existing static data more intelligent and useful. I can tell you that everyone in our HR department, given that I just did exactly what you said, I instant messaged or used our messaging platform last week to, hey, can I get a copy of my insurance card? Did you go through the app? Well, the app's messing up. Cool. Well, here it is. I mean, I obviously just not gonna have my own insurance card, but it would have a lot of information there. Anyways, what are some other examples, and what's the engagement look like, Brad, when you're getting into these deals with an advisor? And walk us through some engagements that you guys have already had some success with.
Yeah. So I'll let Tom speak to the specific engagements, but like the key here, and especially as Tom's talking about the data part, is how do you simplify the onboarding? Because if you simplify the onboarding, people can connect what's the ROI to it and then see like, okay, I see now how I can get some initial value, and then I can see how it expands. So whether that's from a client perspective or a trusted advisor perspective, expansion equals more revenue. So the way that Tom was pretty much responsible for this, that we simplified the onboarding. The onboarding is, hey, we'll set you up with the service. We'll create a whole bunch of folders, like in SharePoint usually, for all your different functional areas of the business: sales, marketing, HR, enablement, all that type of stuff. And that'll be the starting point. So let's not get super deep at the beginning, all these potential use cases, and just get caught down a rabbit hole. Let's just look at some very data-based workflows that you have and figure out how to automate those. That's the crawl. That's what people are like, hey, I can justify how much this platform costs just by solving the HR workflow or the onboarding of salespeople and enablement workflow or whatever that is. So that's the context of the conversation initially. And then kind of more of the walk phase is, okay, and we can also integrate to your ERP, or we can integrate to your Salesforce or to your CX system, because oftentimes just those static repositories don't show you the whole picture of the company. You might want to say, hey, I want to take this out of the CX platform. I want to correlate that to Salesforce. I want to create a QBR about, how this client's doing. Great. Love that use case. That is a horrible initial use case because there's just a lot of dependencies. So let's get you doing something very simple where your whole business starts to understand how to use AI. And then let's, during that process, start talking. And who is being talked with? Well, the TAs are being talked with. We're being talked with on a technical level, but it gives you this kind of future dialogue, because in a platform, the pieces that you pay for are the AI utilization and the data hosting. So as you start to connect to more data and you start to use AI more, kind of the recurring revenue benefit to the TAs and to us increase over time. And Tom, I don't know if you want to talk about any, or Koby.
Yeah, Tom, I definitely want to hear the examples, and I know the audience does too, but I do want to double click on something really quick. If I'm an advisor, what I just heard, so we talk about the pressure that AI puts on organizations. You got a lot of CIOs or VPs trying to figure out how to answer to their other executives and their business on what they're doing around AI and what's a roadmap look like and everything. What I'm hearing from both of you guys is the ability to advise a company that, hey, I can be a release valve here for that pressure, and we can do so in a very slow, methodical way that gives you the ability to intake the goodness of AI without having to go do a ton of cleanup and work that'll eventually need to get done. But this will allow you to answer to your company of what you're doing and start to get some motions put in place to give them a little bit of muscle memory, or to build that up on how to utilize AI and not have to worry about the security piece, which, Tom, I'll definitely want to dive into what you guys are doing specifically and any key talk tracks as the advisors can use to introduce that. And number two, that regular compliance that's continually moving. I mean, that's a motion that is not set. There's a lot of different company or a lot of different eyes looking at what changes need to be made as this technology is moving so quickly. And the long and the short of it is this is a nice, I wouldn't call it an easy button, right? But it is a nice, easier conversation to introduce to your clients. Tom, what are you seeing whenever you guys are in the deal and taking the approach of this? Can you walk through a couple of those win stories for the audience as well?
Yeah, I totally can. And we'll save the deal that you want to talk about for after we can go into that
Yeah.
yeah, deeper. But you hit the head on the nail, right? The talks that we have start along the lines with every AI talk with we have a fear of GRC, standard governance, and then we have these big dreams that we want to build, and we don't know how to get between here and there, right? It's why the stats out of Gartner say 92% of CIOs say they're investing in AI this year, but then Salesforce says 11% of them have a plan, right? That gap is we don't know how to handle governance and we don't know how to baby step into into getting to what we want to deploy, a long term out of AI. For us, it almost is an easy button, and when you look at this as a partner, as a TA who's going out to move this, the fact that we can take and disarm the concerns about governance by providing secure, compliant usage with no fear of vendor lock-in puts CIOs who are traditionally difficult to sell in a position of understanding the technology and being comfortable with the security. And then the baby steps gives all of the rest of the organization a way to move in. So you mentioned a bunch of them, but HR is a huge low-hanging fruit for enterprise search. Once you start mentioning to customers, you can not only baby step and give everybody access to a ChatGPT like client that gives access to every model and is secure and compliant in usage, but on top of that, we can give you low hanging ROI on enterprise search. We've been trying to solve as an enterprise, as a company to try to solve enterprise search for 15, 20 years, and it's proven to be difficult. LLMs have made that so easy right now. So, sales data, marketing data, when you want to talk about onboarding data, training data, service manuals, all of these represent generally static content that may grow, but the traditional content isn't changing much. And every one of these has a huge impact of ROI on a company if you can knock those out. So we are providing an easy button because we're letting them push the big company pipeline stuff off a bit and find ROI today and find purchase in a secure, compliant system. And it's really turned into, and it's going to sound ridiculous on this call unless you've been on a call with us, 1 or 2 call closes, 10-day closes on AI on new client engagements, right? These are amazing
That
stats.
actually doesn't surprise me. You've got this feeding frenzy of people that are looking for a way to do this. There's still a ton of paralysis as far as being fear to move. You guys are removing a lot of that fear again and giving them an answer to go back to the company and say, "Hey, we're doing something," right? And then the expansion part is the fun part, seeing how much they utilize the technology and where they go with it from there. What is it, in particular, Tom, like if you're giving a talk track to an advisor and you say, this is how we secure it, this is what we do, could you simplify that message so they can take that to their clients and say, hey, here's how they're making AI easier
Yep.
on the security side?
Yeah, we can talk about it from 2 angles. First is attestations of non-training. So all of the vendors that we work with have a public-facing attestation of non-training if you're using their corporate models, right? So you're using it through the pipeline that we provide. So we monitor that and put that in front of our clients so that they know every one of them is SOC 2 compliant, every one of them is HIPAA compliant, every one of them has public attestations to not train. So you can be confident that our compliance team are monitoring on every one of the vendors those statements. So no matter which model you're using, you can use your own internal company data because you're not fearful it's going to be trained on it. That's the first concern. So that's pipeline A. Pipeline B is just an understanding that if you're put up to a SOC 2 audit, let's say, the intent of a SOC 2 audit is as you move through the audit, show me where the data came from, who had access, and where the data went to. Since all of the enterprise tools, that includes Copilot, ChatGPT Pro, Anthropic, Perplexity, all of their clients provide only quantitative data for reporting. They don't provide qualitative data. They tell you how many tokens were used. If you're put up to an audit and the data moves through one of their platforms, today you can't show that to an auditor and a company would fail that SOC 2 audit. Now, I'm sure Coalfire and other organizations are working on fixing this. We solve this by putting enterprise monitoring and auditing as an umbrella over all of the tools. So basically, this enterprise observability layer just allows a compliance person to understand at any point for the next 7 years, they can look up who, when, what model, what was actually requested, and what the actual response was, so that they can be subjected to an audit on any data that moved through one of the AI tools in our platform and pass that audit. It's that compliance check mark. I know that's way bigger than a simple statement, but it's that compliance check mark that really CIOs go, great. This is the thing we've been looking for. We don't have to build this ourselves or buy a technology solution to secure, kind of the back end of our entire organization to do this.
So if I were to summarize it, right, and that was a great amount of information, essentially the way that you guys are tackling compliance is putting an umbrella that tracks the data through whatever platform it runs through for up to 7 years, right? To make sure that in particular SOC 2 audits are passed and any other regulatory and compliant needs are met. And then as far as the other component, the ability to ingest public data but keep your private data behind a firewall and securely there is really what the specialization is. That so that's the two-part security conversation that an advisor could then tee up. I'm going to pause. We have a couple of questions that have come in, and we'll take those from the chat really quick. Let's see here. How does it work commercially? What do you actually? What's the product here, Brad? What is it that you're paying for? Is it the platform? How is pricing set up? Is it? I know you guys took a little bit of a unique approach to this when it was launched. So if you wouldn't mind getting into that for everybody, so they can start to digest it, wrap their heads around it.
Sure. So there's a platform fee. So we just talked about observability and all that, but the notion of you have one place to connect to that kind of bridges you into a bunch of AI models, a bunch of data sources. So there's a platform fee, $2,500, $3,500 a month. That includes a certain amount of AI usage. So Tom used the term tokens, but that's just the metric of AI usage. There's a certain amount included with that in the platform fee. Above that, it's a usage-based system. So, you could just basically have buckets of AI brain power usage. That's the platform on the AI side. On the data side, it's about how much data do you want to host. So if you say, hey, the HR folks are going to upload those 100 documents, that's 20 gigs of data. Okay, there's a per gigabyte fee in kind of 100 gig increments. And so the notion is let's get you some very simple things here. Let's get some data in the system. But as you decide, hey, I want to add more and I want to add more and I want to add more, you're adding recurring contracted revenue streams for data usage. As you use more data, I guarantee you're going to be using more AI to process it. And it becomes this kind of ladder effect so that you can turn a $3,500 a month platform into a $20,000 a month MRR kind of total spend in a couple of years, because as people start to inject more data and get more value out of it. So that's the kind of laddering concept that we have going on, and seems to have good buy-in in the market.
And so what I'm kind of hearing out of this is it's a fairly low entry point in comparison to what I think a lot of people think AI is going to cost to get into it and build it out and do all the things. But it does have scalability for an advisor to see billing go up. And I believe you guys are account based on this. So as the bill goes up, the advisor then rides along with that and gets that usage, which is fantastic. The big piece that I'm hearing, and to answer the question that came up after this one, is going to be, what industries, what market size, in particular, is there anything to attack? I kind of think this is across every vertical, right? On both sides. I mean, you can see SMB customers utilizing this all the way up through the enterprise. And I think you guys have already had success across multiple different manufacturing, legal, healthcare. But anything you guys could speak to in particular on those on that particular question?
I'll do a quick one there. So yeah, it's definitely across industries, so there's no real limit there. But kind of while the entry point's low, sometimes this platform concept gets compared to like a seat license. I think somebody brought that up on chat. So if you've got like 20 employees, 30 employees, and you're thinking, okay, well, I could pay $20 a seat to get this over here, that might be tough for you to absorb kind of the entry fee of the platform. So what we usually find is companies with 100 or more people, it tends to be kind of a sizing thing, so they can get past the kind of that attempt to make the equivalent kind of seat versus platform fee. That seems to be usually just like an early part of it. And then, folks that have large stores of proprietary data. So again, that's not industry specific, but those are folks that there was an earlier question about how quickly do you get ROI? Well, that really is a reflexive of how quickly can you get the owners of that data, like Tom brought up HR, to copy paste from existing file store into the AI system. As soon as you disintermediate a worker at the company getting access to the data from subject matter experts, there's workflows that you're now changing, and so efficiencies that you're gaining. So the ROI, within the first month, you're looking to pick off some workflows that have been very data oriented but have taken a lot of human time. And so that's kind of where you kind of focus. I don't know, Tom, if you had any thoughts on the industries or any of that.
No, yeah, everything you said, Brad, was correct. We are seeing a higher penetration in the things where Expedient is typically big in retail, manufacturing, but across the board, this AI solution has opened doors for us to organizations, kind of in every sector. And it's I'm with Brad. We're finding purchase in the companies that are over 100 users, but as you're approaching a customer, if you have 20 users and you're looking at OpenAI, so ChatGPT Pro Enterprise, that's $200 a seat, right? So at that point, at 20 users, we're still more effectively priced than that. So you really do need to kind of look to see what, on the smaller SMB side, what's their plan to consume for AI, and what's their current bucket, because there's still value even at smaller companies, but we're finding a lot of success at 100 users plus.
So there's a couple of other questions that came in, and thank you guys for those. I did miss the RI one. Thanks for attacking that one. This one's going to be the easiest one, right? Hey, who do we contact at Expedient to kickstart? And if we need to, we'll follow up with that, guys, and make sure that you have the right contact. It'll be Tom and Brad's info, but along with the local partner managers or a national manager that can step in and help if need be to route your opportunity to the right place. I'm going to skip down. Harry just threw one in, and I want to attack this because I think it ties back in, and we'll answer the other ones. So also, today's AI seems to be driven around CX. Totally agree. I think 5-6 years of CX AI has been out there, predictive and conversational. That's been a driving factor, especially through advisors. But he goes and goes much further. What are the real tools and how do they help today? We know they can make current staff more efficient. What examples can lead to generate interest in clients? Particularly, I'm assuming, Harry, you meant from this side of the AI conversation. And Brad, you alluded to this a little bit earlier. This can actually be accompany the CX conversation, right? You're creating. So let's work through a scenario. You're in a deal selling the CX platform, and the AI that could be voice recognition or accent changes and things like that we've seen come out that are really, really cool on the CX side of things. But as you're talking to that other client, you're like, hey, what are you guys doing for the rest of your AI conversation, or are you exploring other pieces of it? We can bring in a simplistic approach to take all of those call recordings, especially like say it's a healthcare organization that has to hold on to those call recordings for a long time, right? 5, 6, 7 years, whatever that regulatory, I think 7 years. And so they have all these call recordings. You can now take that CX platform, dump it into this, have them analyzed, and then give them back different recognitions of things that they could be missing from what could create a better customer experience, pull out commonalities, do better training internally. On top of the stuff that Tom and Brad mentioned around HR, you also have legal comparison, right? Where now people are utilizing legal search a little differently when it comes to AI. Here's all of our common red lines in our contracts. Here are some things that we can come into and start to streamline the use of our teams. Now, a lot of regulatory compliance around the legal side, but again, putting that in a secure platform that allows them to do what is understood to be within the guidelines and keep out what's not. So it's protecting the client from themselves, which is a number one thing that a lot of organizations are, again, hesitant to utilize. But Tom, Brad, do you guys have any other examples? Those are the ones that just kind of flew off the top of my head of some of the use cases, again, that could be exciting for customers to start utilizing the platform.
I mean, our own internal use case probably resonates heavily with people. So as we release the chat client, the very first thing you think crawl, walk, run, our crawl was our OSC reps, right? We have 90 OSC reps. They man the data centers, they man the tickets, they make sure that things get done. Their first uses that they just started using the chat manually for was exporting their ticket notes as a PDF and summarizing them, right? So that they can read these 100-page tickets easily and consume the data. When we saw that, our run approach was our walk approach was we'll take a no-code tool. We'll use one of our connectors and connect it to the database, allow people to pull the ticket automatically by ticket number, and then get an executive summary and a technical summary. That found purchase in 60-70% of our OSC staff. When you look at the hours that saves at shift change, when you look at the hours that saves at escalation, the estimate is 2,600 hours a year that we're saving from this tool, which is something we've maybe invested 15 hours into building the no code tool, getting it out there and telling people how to use it. That's $167,000 to $170,000 of ROI that we see before we've really even productized the tool internally. So there's lots of use cases around support where I think we'll find purchase of tickets. Let me summarize tickets. Let me get insight from all of the tickets we've taken. Let me ingest some of our playbooks and some of the understanding of how we solve problems to make lower and lower level tech supports more and more effective, freeing up the higher level techs to be able to do resolution cases and thus driving NPS scores up, right? There's an entire ecosystem here, which one small solution being provided to drives efficiency across the organization.
So I'll back up a little bit too. So and I think some of the comments in the chat have alluded to this, but the notion of a platform is valuable over time as you increase the kind of complexity in the AI world and the complexity in the data world. So like we talked about CX. Well, hey, a CX vendor is going to be really great within their silo in their world. But what happens when you need to correlate that to Salesforce? How does that kind of happen? How do you de-silo that? Well, if you have a platform, you can now be connected to those multiple sources. So you can start asking questions across them. So that's a general sense of why platform is valuable. In concert, not necessarily like, oh, I've got to choose CX AI versus platform AI. It's just two different ways that are complementary to think about it. But specifically, like a couple other like use cases. One, salespeople answer RFPs. Marketing and sales enablement has built tons of information over the course of history of how to help a salesperson answer that. But we're hiring salespeople all the time. Every company is. And so how do you ensure that all of that great information is indexed? Oh, well, hey, the marketing team has a CMS, and then you got to figure out where to log into, and then you got to ask the question the right way, or which year was all that's disintermediated. Now you can go into AI chat and say, hey, I have an RFP. Here's the 20 questions. What's the answer? Here's the answer for question 1. Here's the answer for question 2. And here's the link to the source material. So essentially, you've made it easier for a salesperson to respond to RFPs, get the right marketing material. That's a pretty big one. Another one that we find people doing is just onboarding and enablement. So constantly hiring new employees. They go through different tracks. You have an LMS that you put them through, but all the information that's behind the LMS, it's like, hey, you go through it in your first 30 days, but what happens when you have questions later? And so, you can again dump that into a file folder and now it's AI accessible. So you can sit there and be like, enablement and onboarding doesn't need to stop in your first 30 days because your questions don't stop in your first 30 days. So people are thinking like, hey, what's all of this enterprise data we've created that's unique to our organization that we can now make AI accessible to employees and applications? So those are a couple additional ones that we see people kind of popping to, but definitely things that can improve sales and the ability to answer sales questions. There's a lot of motivation around making sure that's accessible.
I had something just kind of dawn on me, and this is always dangerous, right? Just having an original thought in front of a live audience. But it sounds like what you guys have built with this platform is similar to a data fabric that did interconnection into multiple different things for like cloud provider, like AWS going into different like a Ring Central or platform and connecting privately and then securing it a little differently and allowing data to transport on a data fabric. This is almost like an AI fabric. You guys are connecting into multiple different AI platforms, allowing the goodness of the technology to flow to the customer, but in a secure manner in which none of their data then reaches back out publicly. So there's a couple of really good questions, but I just, as I wanted to describe this a little differently, like if I was sitting in front of a client, I'd be like, these guys have built an AI platform that's like a fabric into all the different LLMs. And somebody had asked, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier, Tom, but can you hit on the major platforms that this can connect into? And I think it's endless, right? You guys can connect into any of them, including, it's not a silly question, the Five9 and Genesis platforms of their AI. If they have a platform that's allowing connection, you guys can go into that and maybe tackle both of those two questions out of the chat if you don't mind.
Yep. So initially, ChatGPT, so all of their models from OpenAI, all of the models from Anthropic, which are the Claude models, all of the models from Google, all of the Llama models, and then most of the models that Perplexity provides. The limit of the models isn't based on models that today we have. They are vendors who are willing to attest publicly that they will not train on your data, and they're SOC 2 compliant and HIPAA compliant. So there are vendors who can bring up every single one of the 1,800 open source models, and we can include those into our system when clients need them. They have to have an understanding of how the model was trained and what the biases are in that model. But as long as the vendor is not training on the data, not sharing personal data, not storing it, and they're HIPAA compliant and SOC 2 compliant, we can bring them into our platform.
So let me kind of walk through a scenario that I think could happen or could help with the advisors. So you got a customer. First question. This is going to go into what are some questions and talk tracks. I'm going to throw a couple out, and I'd love to get your guys' opinion. But essentially, the number one question is, what are you doing? What does your AI roadmap look like? Or what kind of pressure are you getting to implement AI, and what are you doing with it? If you got companies that want to go to Google, all of these guys now have vertical centric, LLMs that you can go. Like Google has a healthcare LLM out of the box. There's a financial LLM out of the box now that you can, companies can go directly to it. But what we're saying is, hey, instead of doing that, route through Expediant's platform, do it, and here's how they're going to make life easier for you, and monitor this. And especially if you have a resource-starved team or teams that you're just not quite up to date on to protect your own organization, this is a really nice security measure and blanket to offer at a relatively low rate because you're going to be getting into the same information, but now you're doing so a lot more responsibly from an organization's viewpoint. So that's a really good key talk track in how to introduce the idea, in my opinion. What are some other key questions that you would ask, Brad or Tom to kickstart the conversation, or what have you seen? And then we've got about 3 minutes left. So I want to save at least 1 minute for that quick win, Tom, and that you can take us through.
Sure. So, some of the easy questions to ask to get these kicked off are, have you implemented any part of your AI strategy yet? It's a simple question, but where are you in that process? As opposed to even the roadmap, right? At some point, there's some AI choices already made in every organization. Where are you in your AI implementation strategy? What are the long-term goals of your AI implementation strategy? How are you handling governance? Governance, GRC is going to be the talk of 2025. How do you handle risk, compliance, and governance around AI? That question hasn't been answered by the big providers yet, which is the place where we are going to find, we as TAs, we as Expedient are going to find the most value that we can drive to customers. It's amazing to connect the data, and that's where they're going to see ROI is in the connecting the data kind of ecosphere of bringing in data. And there was a question about copy and paste. It's not copy and paste. It's just bringing that data down into a new repository, having that data live. There is some data duplication issues, but we can talk about those separately. But really it is, how are you handling governance around AI? What are you doing for enterprise search today? What are you doing for AI? Those are the questions that are leading to further discussions.
And just to tackle this really quickly, and it's going to be a short answer, and we can expand on it in a bit, but this is different from 5.9 and Genesis. Genesis and 5.9 are going to be very specific AI that's going to drive the customer experience. This is a platform that can extend into that and help support it and grow. But this is going to be on that other side of the generative, I can't ever say it, Gen AI. It's a running joke around here. I can never say it right. But this is what gives you the ability to utilize the chat GPT and mix in your private data with that. And some of that data could be originating from your platforms of 5.9, Genesis, et cetera, through your customer experience. That can also be pulled in. So this is more on top of and in addition to versus like a competitive balance there. The other question here that I wanted to ask, let's see here, Tom, and then we're going to go over 1 minute, Doug, sorry. But I want to hear that story, but I want to get this question answered. How do you keep the customer's production data synchronized with Expedient's data? Can you give a quick, overview of that?
Sure, that is just a standard ETL process. So you're not moving the data over, you're vectorizing the data. So you're pulling it, you're pulling out the text, you're vectorizing, you're embedding the semantic search values into that data, and then that data is kept in a new environment for that customer, and the customer actually owns that data. We don't own that data. So what you're creating is a new source of data, vectorized data for each of their data repositories that the customer can utilize themselves. 5 years from now, that all data will most likely be vectorized, and this just starts them on that path.
But there'll be a synchronization frequency. So as data gets added to wherever it originates from, you can kind of look nightly and say, what's the changes? And then we, kind of update the repository based on what's changed.
It's almost like a backup copy, right? You're just updating the changes, you're not repeating the whole process over and over again.
Yep, you got it.
All right. So Tom, in the fastest that you can deliver it, can you take us through that really good win story? I think it was a couple of calls and a close. It sounds like something that would be really impactful.
Yeah, so Luna came to us through one of our TAs, Tier 4, and Tier 4 brought them with the understanding of they want to explore AI, but they weren't sure what they wanted to do. Very traditional to almost how all of these calls start. And in the discussions, it very quickly went to, if I can provide compliant chat and private chat to our internal employees right now and give them access to it, lower the risk of shadow AI, lower the risk that they're leaking our data or leaking our performas, anything that they're pushing through AI today. I can give them those productivity tools. The true kind of crawl win, it immediately led into, hold on, explain to me how in one day I can connect my SharePoint data sources in and automatically solve this enterprise search problem that we've had across, one of them is HR data directly. One of them for them is the kind of RFP use case we use. And in both of those cases, everything that they had thinking about long-term AI became ancillary. Like, awesome, you're going to give us a platform. We can think about that next year. For right now, let's get AI in, get all of our users more productive, and then let's start getting ROI out of enterprise search. This exact story we tell took 10 days to close from introduction to them signing the paperwork. The TA hadn't seen that kind of speed. This is just the world we kind of live in today with these closes.
It's releasing that pressure, right?
Yep.
That is mounting on these organizations. Guys, thank you very much. I think this was super insightful and gives us a new view on how to tackle an LLM conversation for advisors. And there's already been a lot of success with it. So thanks again for joining, Doug. We will hand it back over to you, sir.